perhaps never before in human history has the act of being seen been so crucial. In an era of digital mirrors, where every action is reflected through millions of invisible eyes, humanity lives in a colossal psychological experiment called status. The Status Game, by British writer and journalist Will Storr, is one of the sharpest works on the social nature of humanity. The book dissects a truth both obvious and terrifying. Every civilization, every religion, every social network, and even our smallest thoughts are driven by the status game. Each person, whether they admit it or not, is a player, living within invisible reward systems, constantly seeking respect, to be heard, to be loved, to be seen. But what elevates this work beyond sociology is how it reveals a profound paradox. The very desire for recognition, which once helped humanity evolve, is now the root of modern suffering. When status becomes the measure of value, every moral action can transform into a tactic. A person might do good not necessarily out of compassion, but for moral status points. A united community might not be driven by love, but by the fear of being left behind. Will Storr doesn't write like an aloof scholar, but like someone standing amidst the crowd, listening to the pulse of society. He points out that from the first tribes to today's digital world, every power system revolves around three games: dominance, virtue, and achievement. These determine who sits at the center and who must leave the table. And whether we're conscious of it or not, we're all calculating scores every time we speak, smile, or post a picture. Then a chilling yet necessary question arises. If everything humans do is merely a move in the status game, from kindness to cruelty, from love to hatred, then what is our true self? Does a self exist that is independent of others' gazes, or is freedom, what humans long for, merely another pawn named respect? The book offers no answers. Instead, it opens a mirror, and in that mirror, the reader is forced to see themselves. A creature both pathetic and astonishing, both creative and so desperate for recognition that it immerses itself in the endless game of status. His name was Ben. When his ship vanished offshore, his entire world vanished with it. No one called his name, no one saw him, no one needed him anymore. In the dense silence of his solitude, Ben realized that the cruelest thing wasn't hunger or fear, but the feeling of being excluded from the human game. A person who loses their place in the eyes of others will gradually fade from their own self, like a memory erased from collective consciousness. From that story, we begin to see the naked truth of human nature. People live to be seen, to be recognized, to be respected, not for money, not for love, but the very feeling of being valued is the deepest motive governing life. Scientists have measured that when the human brain receives signals of respect, the pleasure centers light up, no different than when we eat, make love, or win. Status is spiritual nourishment. Without it, the soul shrinks like a body deprived of oxygen. Humans are creatures obsessed with their position in the pack. From the time of hunting and gathering, status determined who got a share of the meat and who was left behind when the hailstones fell. In every group, the survival instinct demands that we know how to play, understand the rules, and maintain our score in the eyes of others. For millions of years, the brain evolved to detect status signals as swiftly as lightning. A contemptuous glance, a casual compliment, a respectful gesture, all are indicators of our current standing. Today, even living in glass houses and holding smartphones, that instinct remains the same. We no longer vie for caves or food, but we still compete for symbols of status: degrees, titles, followers, likes, branded bracelets. Each symbol is a piece of a medal in a never-ending game. The author calls this world an infinite network of status games. In one place, a small group vies for influence in a boardroom. Elsewhere, millions compete with fabricated happy photos. Each person participates in dozens of games simultaneously, within family, at work, among friends, in online society. Each game has a scoreboard, rewards, punishments, and most importantly, an audience. Without an audience, the game dies. Without a game, humans are empty. But the game is not just a stage for action, it's also a cage of meaning. A person considered successful in one game might be deemed useless in another. Therefore, each group creates its own imaginary world, where values are defined and measured differently. A scientist isn't important in the world of models, and a gangster doesn't need moral points in an academic community. Each of these worlds is a chessboard with its own rules, where status shifts and values distort in our minds. Status is not just a measure, It's a mental map of survival. We don't just fear losing money, we fear losing face. We don't just want to win, we want to be seen winning. Recognition doesn't just make us happy, it makes us believe we exist. And that very belief has created the entire history of humanity, from the first tribal chiefs to modern empires, religions, academies, and social networks. The human world is, therefore, a world of status symbols. Every word, garment, gesture carries a code of meaning. When we bow, we lose points. When we smile at the right moment, we gain points. When we say something reasonable to an influential person, we earn prestige points. And when we challenge the rules of the game, we can be erased from the board. Every seemingly free action is, in reality, a move in this invisible game. To be recognized is important. It's the most beautiful illusion the human brain has ever produced. It's what makes us work, create, love. And it's also what makes us jealous, insecure, and suffer. It's a legal addiction that makes the world function, yet constantly cracks it open. He then categorized the games, a significant discovery that unravels the book's depth. There are 3 paths to ascend the peak of status. The first path is dominance where status is achieved through power, threats, and fear. The second path is virtue where one climbs the ranks through kindness, integrity, and contribution. And the final path is achievement where scores come from creativity, productivity, and effectiveness. The dominance game is humanity's oldest. It exists in primate troops, where the strongest beat their chests to claim the highest seat and the weak learn to submit to survive. In society, it manifests in tyrants, leaders who rule through fear over their subordinates. The submissive may appear obedient on the surface, but deep down, they harbor seeds of rebellion. Thus, this game establishes order quickly but fragilely, creating temporary stability but long-term destruction. The virtue game emerged when humans learned that respect could come not from force, but from trust. Those honored are those who share, who prioritize group interests over their own ego. Civilized societies thrive thanks to such individuals who lead through influence, not whips. But this game also has a dark side. When morality becomes the measure of status, people begin to feign sanctity, humiliating others to prove their own goodness. This gives rise to witch hunts, storms of condemnation, and crowds intoxicated by the feeling of being on the side of justice. The achievement game is a child of the modern era, where society encourages competition. Creativity becomes the fastest way to climb the ranks. People build empires, invent technologies, write books, win awards, all to score points on an invisible scoreboard. This game drives progress and creates unprecedented prosperity, but it also makes humans addicted to results. When scores become the sole meaning, failure equates to self-destruction. These 3 paths intertwine in every relationship. A father might dominate his family, yet pursue virtue in religion and achievement in his work. A society might extol compassion in words but secretly reward aggression in real life. And among these 3 games, humans oscillate like tightrope walkers, sometimes respected, sometimes scorned, sometimes joyful, sometimes stumbling. The frightening thing is that every game makes us believe we are right. In the dominance game, we believe strength is righteousness. In the virtue game, we believe punishing others is just. In the achievement game, we believe winning is the ultimate purpose. But in truth, we are merely trying to maintain a feeling of being slightly superior, just enough to feel significant. At the end of this section, Storr recounts psychological experiments where humans reacted to status loss so powerfully it caused physical pain. When degraded, cortisol floods the system, heart rate increases, and the brain's pain processing regions light up. The brain doesn't differentiate between being physically hit and being humiliated. In the modern world, we may not be whipped, but we still suffer invisible blows whenever we are ignored, compared, or undervalued. Therefore, understanding the game is not just about climbing the ranks, but about recognizing the mechanism of pain. When we know why we are angry, jealous, or afraid, we realize that behind all these emotions is just one plea: please see my worth. The consequences when the game gets out of control, when scores become an addiction, and when society transforms into an endless scoring machine. That is when humanity must confront the dark side of its very need to be seen. There is a kind of injury that leaves no bruise but can devastate a person's entire life: the loss of status in human society. The feeling of being demeaned, humiliated, or forgotten is not just sadness, but a biological trauma. When people are stripped of their role, deemed inferior, the nervous system reacts as if facing physical pain. Studies show that the brain regions processing bodily pain light up simultaneously with the pain of being scorned. The human brain cannot distinguish between being hit and being humiliated. Men who fail, are ridiculed, or lose their honor often become dangerous. The author describes them as those pushed to the edge of the board. With no scores left to protect, they are ready to overturn the game. Some become extremists, some resort to violence, some self-destruct. Because losing status means losing the meaning of existence itself. When no one respects them, the brain no longer has a reason to live. These phenomena are escalating in modern society. Isolation, the feeling of being left behind, being disdained by the system leads many to extremist groups where they can replay the status game under new rules. There, hatred is rewarded and empathy is punished. The angrier they get, the more they are seen as heroes. When the rules of the game change, people change too. An ordinary person yesterday can become a prophet of hatred today, simply because, in the new game, that role gives them the feeling of being seen. Then Storr leads us to another terrifying discovery. The modern world has transformed into a giant status scoring machine. Social media, traditional media, work, even personal life, all have public scoreboards. Every like, every compliment, every achievement is like a small coin dropping into our status jar. The more witnesses, the more dopamine the brain releases, creating an addiction to recognition. Before, status was something we felt through direct gazes. Now, it's digitized, displayed, updated every second. And as the world becomes a global stage, the audience is no longer limited, yet self-esteem is more fragile than ever. Every swipe is a comparison, every photo a reminder that we are not good enough, beautiful enough, loved enough. People say modern society is an era of freedom, but in reality, it's an era of surveillance. Each individual becomes an athlete in an invisible tournament where scores are never enough. It is in this environment that the old rules of the game begin to slip. Status no longer comes from age or achievement, but from the ability to attract attention. Fame becomes the highest metric. The status game transforms into a magic trick of image. People no longer need to genuinely work, they only need to make others believe they are living an admirable life. The feeling of being seen becomes more important than actually being someone. However, this game not only erodes individual souls, but also wears down social trust. When everyone strives to shine, no one truly listens. When everyone is performing, the world loses its genuine audience, collective emotions become artificial, kindness becomes a strategy, and sincerity turns into a risk. Storr describes the brain as a status slot machine. Each time it's complimented, the brain receives a small reward. Each time it's ignored, the brain suffers a slight shock. Like a slot machine player, we keep pulling the lever, posting more, showing off more, seeking more achievements, hoping the next time we'll hit the jackpot of recognition. But this machine never stops and the players gradually become exhausted. Someone asks, "So what's the solution?" Storr doesn't answer immediately. He merely says, "Look at the map of the games you're playing. How many of them truly belong to you and how many are imposed by others?" Because every game redefines the human being, and we are only truly free when we know which game we are playing, for whom, and why. Humans cannot stop playing because the game itself is the structure of meaning. But if we don't learn to see the rules of the game, we will forever be pawns controlled by the desire to be seen. Status can be a fire that warms the soul, but it can also be a flame that consumes the self. The spotlight of the first act lowers, the audience hasn't even had time to breathe. The status game has been revealed, but a larger game, the game of belief, of illusion, of a society intoxicated by scores, still lies ahead, and the question still hangs in the air. Can we live without winning? Or by refusing to play, do we simply fall into another game, the game of those who believe they have escaped all games? From the very beginning of every game, there is an unhealable flaw. Humans never feel enough. The eternal defect of the game lies precisely where it promises rewards. Each time we climb a step higher, the moment of contentment flashes, then fades, giving way to a new hunger. The human brain is programmed to crave more, never to stop. Because if it stops, the game ends, and with it, humanity's vital drive. No matter how much status is achieved, the feeling of not enough persists. The rich want to be more revered, the famous want to last longer, the virtuous want to be purer. The neural mechanism operates like a hamster wheel. Each revolution seems to move forward, but in reality, it's just repeating. When a reward is received, dopamine levels drop, and to feel alive, humans must hunt for another reward. This is an ancient tragedy replayed in modern language. We believe that achieving more will make us happier, but that very belief ensures happiness never truly arrives. What we perceive as the destination is merely an illusion on the racetrack. Thus, all status games are sophisticated traps of scarcity. In this context, another reactive force emerges: universal resentment towards those above. In tribal times, when someone boasted of a victory, the group would immediately ridicule them, pulling them back down to earth. No one was allowed to stand too high, for one person's pride could threaten the balance of the entire group. Humans understood early on that to survive, the mountain of status must be kept flat. A community might tolerate talent, but never forgive ostentation. Today, that spirit remains intact. We enjoy admiring others, but we also find satisfaction in seeing them fall. Every piece of news about the downfall of the rich or famous is received like a comforting balm. Envy is society's balancing mechanism, a primal instinct to curb those who rise too quickly. However, its dark side is the cruelty hidden behind a smile. In a world perpetually thirsty for status, one person's joy often means another's disappointment. From there, humans enter a more dangerous phase, living in worlds of status delusion. As the game prolongs, players forget it's just a game. They begin to believe absolutely in the rules their group has set, considering them truth. One group might believe that humility is the highest virtue. Another believes winning at all costs is glory, yet another worships suffering as a path to purification. In the eyes of each group, their rules are the only reality, and anyone who doesn't conform is mistaken, an outsider. Humans live in dreams of their own making, and the tragedy is that these dreams are self-reinforcing through success. The more praise they receive, the more people believe their rules are correct. They become blind to reality, and tragedy begins when two opposing dreams collide. From such conflicts, human history has formed a series of struggles not just for power, but for the very meaning of right. Yet over thousands of years, one thing has changed. Humanity has matured by shifting the game from blood to belief. From savage tribes where power was established with blows and blades, to civilized societies where status comes from knowledge, virtue, or creativity, the status game has evolved. Overt forms of violence have gradually been replaced by rituals, laws, and softer symbols. In dark times, rulers burned others alive to prove their power. But through centuries, humans learned that maintaining status through violence only generated fear, not respect, as consent replaced fear. The game became more sophisticated. Humans began to control each other with ideas instead of weapons. The world gradually built new structures: religions, philosophies, academies, media. Each of these structures is a civilized status game. The sage needs no sword, only words. The king needs no torture, only symbols of power laws, morality, rituals. All are products of social evolution, where violence transformed into order. Yet beneath this veneer of civilization, the old instinct remains. When an idea is challenged, people react as if slapped. When someone rejects our belief, the brain activates defense mechanisms, no different than being physically attacked. Civilization is a thin shell concealing ancient status instincts. We debate to find truth, but often it's merely to maintain our position in the game of beliefs. Human history, viewed from afar, is an endless journey of revolutions. Each revolution is merely a changing of the guard among players. New ones ascend, old ones descend, new rules are written, and the game continues. From freed slaves to women gaining the right to vote, from the aristocracy losing privileges to the rise of workers, every advance takes the form of a televised status game, where new moralities replace old violence. But in every era, the question remains: can we escape the game, or do we merely switch to a different chessboard, more subtle, brighter, yet still a race of those who never feel enough? In a world gradually becoming civilized, humans imagine they have overcome primal instincts, but the truth is society has learned to harness those instincts as tools. No one is born knowing how to play the status game. We are taught from the moment we open our eyes. Applause, praise, appreciative glances become the first rewards. Every adult smile is a small score. And then, through thousands of invisible signals, society begins to program us to be obedient players. Humans are trained to be status players. Children learn to claim their place to please to win. As they grow up, the game expands into an infinite network: school, work, religion, nation. Each place has its own scoreboard, each scoreboard its own rewards. Those who grasp the rules early climb faster, and soon, our ego is completely shaped by the role the group assigns us. In this machinery, humans no longer know who they are beyond the role society programs. When the game demands obedience, we learn to submit. When it demands ambition, we learn to compete. When it demands morality, we learn to judge. Each individual believes they are free, but in reality, they are merely performing a series of reflexes meticulously trained through rewards and punishments. Then something more frightening happens. Players not only embody roles but also believe absolutely in their game. The brain, in an effort to maintain a sense of control, begins to build beliefs around status. We believe we are right, that our group is good, that those outside are dangerous. Belief is not just an opinion, it's a fortress protecting status. When someone challenges a belief, the brain reacts as if an enemy is attacking. The smarter a person is, the better they are at deceiving themselves, because reason is used not to find truth but to justify existing beliefs. Researchers call this alliance bias. Humans rationalize anything that benefits their side. When we believe we are fighting for what is right, we are willing to do wrong without feeling guilt. It is through this mechanism that status gold rushes are born. When a game discovers a new vein of rewards, people flock to it like gold prospectors. An idea, a movement, a symbol becomes an endless source of points. The louder one defends it, the more they are rewarded with fame, a sense of virtue, and status within the group. History has witnessed countless such frenzies. From medieval witch hunts to political zealot movements, people are intoxicated by the illusion that they are serving good, while in reality, they are merely accumulating moral status. The more eagerly one condemns, the purer they are perceived. Anyone who remains silent is immediately suspected. In recent years, this fervor has reappeared in a new form: online mobs. When social media becomes a giant chessboard, beliefs are exchanged like currency. A statement, a profile picture symbol, a public oath can instantly earn honor points. But these same platforms also nurture a destructive thirst. The more divisive, the more appealing. For every ideological battle is an opportunity to score points for one side. The feeling of morality becomes a psychological gamble. When crowds believe they are on the side of justice, they commit cruel acts with a smile. Punishment becomes a ritual of purification, where victims are publicly shamed to prove that moral order still exists. The more severe they are, the better they feel about themselves. This sophisticated status machine makes humans lose the ability to discern truth. No one wants to understand, they only want to win. No one wants to listen, they only want applause. In a world where everyone is right, truth becomes a luxury. And when belief is elevated to property, people would rather lose friends, family, or humanity than lose points. The beauty of civilization is that it replaced violence with ideas. But the danger of civilization is that it transformed ideas into a new battlefield. In that battlefield, those who believe they are enlightening humanity are, in fact, merely vying for the brightest torch to shine upon their own faces. The author concludes this section with a quiet paradox. We always seek truth, but what makes us happy is illusion. Belief helps us connect, love, and live with purpose, but it also makes us blind, divisive, and disdainful of one another. Without belief, the game dissolves. With belief, the game ignites. And so, humanity continues to mine the gold of status, where every particle of belief is refined into precious metal, every condemnation is forged into a medal, every illusion displayed as a victory. The game is not over. It has only changed form, from violence to morality, from physical to spiritual. And in the midst of this whirlwind, humans no longer know if they are playing for an ideal or for the very feeling of being superior to others. When belief becomes a reward, when morality transforms into a scoreboard, the status game enters its most dangerous phase: war. Groups no longer play in silence. They march, shout, wave flags, believing they represent truth in every conflict. A simple story is repeatedly told. We are good, they are evil. This narrative is so powerful it can turn gentle people into warriors and compassion into a weapon. Status wars don't just happen on battlefields, but wherever opposing opinions exist in politics, religion, academia, even among seemingly close friends. When someone dares to question, they are immediately branded a traitor. Complexity is crushed by slogans. People forget the world isn't just black and white. They see only win or lose, sinner or saint. The leaders of these games understand this mechanism well. They ignite outrage with simple, dramatic stories. We have been wronged, we deserve more. The enemy threatens our values. These words tap into the core of ancient instinct, where pride and fear merge, and when indignation combines with the pleasure of righteousness, the crowd becomes uncontrollable. In the pre-modern world, individual power was often checked by another force, the tyranny of kin. Anthropologists called it the tyranny of the cousins, a small communal group that monitored and punished anyone exceeding boundaries. There, not the king, but the crowd decided who lived and who disappeared when someone expressed too much difference. They were seen as a threat to communal order. The whole group would unite to humiliate, isolate, or eliminate that individual to restore a sense of fairness. This pattern repeats in modern society. We call it by softer names: collective criticism, cancel culture, public condemnation. But the mechanism is identical. The group that deems itself righteous becomes the new tyranny. In the light of morality, they do what only tyrants once dared to do: destroy others' lives to prove their own purity. In this intoxication of moral power, the world reenacts three ancient archetypes: the victim, the warrior, and the witch. The victim is the revered soul, the symbol of righteous suffering. The warrior is the protector, praised for bravely fighting evil. And the witch, the accused, becomes a sacrifice for collective purification. These three roles endlessly cycle, making the moral game brilliant and cruel at the same time. In all ages, those burned at the stake were always described as dangerous, terrifying, inhuman. They are the excuse for the crowd to consolidate their moral standing. But when the fire dies down, people realize they have just burned a human being. The crowd knows no remorse, because remorse is the privilege of individuals, and the crowd has no soul. From political religious revolutions to online frenzies, all follow the same pattern. Those who believe they are saving the world are often the ones making it more chaotic. The game of justice becomes a collective delusion, where everyone believes their actions are for the good, but in reality, they are merely to prove their own nobility over others. The more people believe they are right, the more dangerous they become. Because when morality is absolutized, it ceases to be a guiding light and becomes a blade in the hands of the blind. Good and evil switch places as quickly as a chessboard flips. A revolution begun with a thirst for freedom can end in slaughter. A human rights movement can turn into a frenzy of punishment. The modern world thought it had escaped witch hunts, but in reality, it only changed the stage. Fire no longer burns with wood, but with words. Every comment is a stab, every share a slice. When honor becomes a trophy, compassion vanishes. Moral status, when it reaches its peak, is no longer morality. The author observes this reality with cold composure. Humans are not evil by nature, but because of the game. Every time we participate, we are drawn into its rules: score points, defend, attack. Every action has a reason, but the result is always the same: division and pain. And then, when the crowd disperses, each person returns to their own solitude. The triumph of victory gives way to a strange emptiness. No audience, no enemy, we suddenly don't know who we are. Perhaps what humans fear most is not losing, but the moment when there is no longer a game to play. In that silence, a quiet question arises: is there a way to live among others without needing to win? Or are all forms of love, cooperation, and trust ultimately just softer tactics of the same status game? No one has a definitive answer, but clearly, looking around, we see justice warriors still walking the streets, new witches being named, and the old fire still burning in new forms. The status game doesn't die. It merely changes masks and increasingly knows how to make us believe we are doing the right thing. Humans are lost in the status dream. When the world becomes too complex, when games overlap and blend, people begin to live in stories of their own making. They no longer see the world as it is, but as they want to believe it should be. From religions, political parties, and movements to small online communities, each is a collective dream where participants absolutely believe they hold the truth. In these dreams, reason sleeps, skepticism becomes a sin, and reality is merely a backdrop for reinforced beliefs. These people are not madmen, but individuals hungry for meaning. When the status game extends beyond the personal, it transforms into a collective ideal, something that makes people feel they are serving something greater than themselves. But at that very moment, they lose their freedom of thought. When an ideal becomes law and doubt is seen as betrayal, the dream turns into a prison. In that prison, status-generating machines are born. They take many forms: religions, parties, businesses, movements, organizations. Each machine is designed to produce and distribute status to those within, rewarding loyalty and punishing resistance. Leaders do not rule by strength, but by their ability to maintain the flow of psychological rewards. A compliment, a title, a medal, a position in the system. All are fuel to keep the machine running. The one at the top is merely hired to sit on the throne. If he stops generating status rewards, the machine will overthrow him. Therefore, power is always linked to the duty of nurturing belief. When leaders dispense a sense of meaning to their subordinates, they will protect him at all costs. When rewards dry up, the system decays, and a new figure will rise, promising a brighter dream. The modern world is full of such machines. Some are cloaked in moral language, others in corporate or political language. But all operate on a common principle, creating a sense of value for participants. The more one conforms, the higher they are promoted, the doubter is demoted, those who dare to leave are erased from memory. And so, millions willingly enter the honor production line, where the meaning of life is measured by obedience. Then, once the status dream reaches its peak, it explodes into an apocalypse. When collective belief becomes sacred, everything opposed is deemed evil, from holy wars and revolutions to purges. Humanity reenacts a familiar ritual: punishment for purification. Crowds believe they are eradicating evil, while in reality they are merely preserving their own sense of goodness. In these wars, language becomes a weapon. People no longer kill with swords, but with honor. An accusation, fake news, a speech can destroy someone's life as if it were a moral duty. The violence of the modern status game is not bloody, but it leaves countless spiritual corpses. Every time society collapses into extremism, the cause is not malice but the fear of losing status. When a group feels disrespected, they react like a body being stabbed. They connect, organize, create myths to restore honor. And if that honor can only be reclaimed by humiliating others, they will do so without hesitation. This destruction is called the apocalyptic cycle of the status game. It begins with belief, grows in pride, and ends in ashes. In each cycle, humans believe they are birthing a new order, but in truth, they are only repeating an old lesson: no one wins the war of honor. More frightening still is that the collective delusion doesn't realize it's a delusion. Like someone dreaming who doesn't know they are asleep, society believes its actions are enlightened. They call it justice, revolution, reconstruction, but in reality, it's just a repetition of an ancient ritual: the sacrifice to status. In that ritual, chosen victims are accused, condemned. The crowd rejoices, feeling purified. A new order is established on the ruins. But with time, those who once held the torch themselves become the new targets. The status game distinguishes neither good nor evil. It adheres to only one rule: whoever captures the gaze of the crowd lives, whoever is forgotten dies. And so humanity circles endlessly in the labyrinth of its own making, both creative and cruel, both craving meaning and fearing that very meaning. Humans play to exist but self-destruct in the very game they built. When the smoke of collective dreams dissipates, only empty faces remain. The feeling of victory vanishes as quickly as a cheer, leaving a cold void. No one remembers why they started, only that they cannot stop, and that is the deepest tragedy. We think we are seeking freedom, but every step only leads us deeper into our own prison. After waves of confusion, a question gradually emerges: is there a way out of the status hell where humans blindly worship their own illusions? The answer lies in a silent but profound movement. When society began to reward competence instead of lineage, creativity instead of submission. At that very moment, the world entered a new chapter: the path out of hell. In medieval Europe, ties of kinship and blood marriages were once shackles of evolution. Power circulated within families, status inherited through bloodline. But then religious reforms, laws prohibiting incest, and the formation of the nuclear family broke down the old structure. When relationships were separated from blood ties, people were forced to seek status externally, unable to rely on their lineage. They had to rely on their own talent, creativity, and capability. That was the moment a new game was born: the game of achievement and initiative. When status was no longer inherited, it had to be created. Players began to compete in academics, labor, exploration, and invention. Every invention, every work, every idea is a declaration. I am valuable because I bring something new to the world. This game unleashed enormous human energy. The game of achievement was not based on oppression or demanding absolute loyalty, but encouraged creativity, experimentation, and error. It was the fertile ground for invention, science, art, and the advancements that transformed humanity. For the first time in history, status was linked to real contribution instead of blind adoration. But like every other game, when it reached its peak, it also fractured, giving rise to the neoliberal self, the brilliant and exhausted child of the achievement age. Modern humans live amidst a sea of success signals: degrees, assets, followers, brands, muscles, physiques, homes, images. Every moment is a display. Each person becomes a brand, every action an advertisement for themselves. No one lives for collective belief anymore, but neither does anyone truly live for themselves. The modern self is transformed into a product, measured by performance, ranked by productivity, valued by image. People work not to accomplish, but to prove their worth. They study not to understand, but to excel. They share not to connect, but to be recognized. Career becomes the new religion. The culture of busyness is revered as a symbol of success. There is nothing more terrifying than being seen as useless. In that cycle, humans carry two selves: the real self full of limitations, tired, sometimes weak, and the displayed, effective self-confident, brilliant, always ready for the gaze of others. The greater the distance between these two selves, the more the soul is depleted. The society of the neoliberal self is also a society of comparison and insecurity. When status is digitized into scores, humans live in a state of continuous surveillance. Everyone looks at others to define their own value. A person might be rich, healthy, intelligent, but as soon as they see someone superior, they immediately feel small. The fear of falling behind becomes a constant nightmare. Injustice, therefore, is no longer a material disparity, but a perception of relative position. When others are honored, dopamine rewards in the brain drop. When applauded, they surge. Humans live not in reality, but in an emotional graph fluctuating with the status ladder. Injustice does not kill the body, but it erodes the spirit. Biological studies show that when demoted in a hierarchy, people actually get sicker. Stress hormones increase, the immune system weakens, lifespan shortens. Status is not just a mental metaphor, it's a biological issue. A drop in social rank can make the body react as if under attack, leading to chronic inflammation and depression. We thought we lived in an era of freedom, but in reality, we merely exchanged shackles, from the shackles of power to the shackles of expectation. Modern people are no longer forced to bow before kings, but they must bow before the perfect ideals they themselves have constructed. They work themselves to exhaustion to prove their worth, then collapse from never feeling enough. Escaping the old hell, humanity entered a new prison, the prison of performance and comparison. Its walls are not made of stone, but of the gaze of others. And while the world celebrates progress, each person quietly confines themselves in a brightly lit room, sitting before a screen, waiting for a like. A compliment, like a child waiting for their parents to look at them. We have replaced swords with scoreboards, the cries of pain with keyboard clicks, but the essence remains unchanged. Still a struggle to be seen, to be loved, to be recognized. And as long as that game exists, every path to freedom leads through a land of mirrors, where we only see ourselves when others are looking. When the world entered an age of countless parallel values, dreams began to collide. Each person, each group, each community is playing its own game with its own rules and its own metrics. Some measure value by achievement, some by virtue, some by power or influence. While one side celebrates creativity and efficiency, the other considers humility and sacrifice the highest symbols. When these games coexist in a global space, conflict is inevitable. Each side believes it is defending what is right. But when two value systems cannot coexist, the world slides into a state of cognitive fracture. We live in an era where an action can be praised by one group and condemned by another. Each person becomes a judge for others, and social media is a 24-hour open court. In that chaotic sound, truth shatters into millions of tiny pieces. Each piece reflects a viewpoint, and no single piece is enough to illuminate the whole picture. This is the moment when extreme status dreams return. One of the most tragic examples is the storm of communism in the last century. Initially, it was a beautiful dream, an egalitarian world where no one was exploited. But when that dream was worshipped as absolute, it became a machine that crushed human beings. To maintain the purity of the ideal, those in power created a system of surveillance, denunciation, punishment, and killing. When belief becomes absolute, people become desperate. They kill because they believe it is good. They expropriate because they believe they are building justice. They create hell in the name of heaven. The dream of equality transformed into a nightmare of control, where fear was the tool for maintaining order. And by the time that fire died out, millions of people had vanished, leaving a void not just in history, but in the human soul. When people believe they have found absolute truth, they are willing to destroy everything else to protect it. From that lesson, perhaps humanity is forced to relearn how to play. We cannot escape the status game because it is the nature of existence. But we can play it differently, more kindly, more wisely. This is where the final 7 rules are laid out like small guiding lights in the labyrinth. First, identify the game you are playing. Know where you are, what the rules are, what the real rewards are. That is the beginning of freedom. Many suffer simply because they play without realizing that the game doesn't belong to them. Second, don't play in someone else's dream. When you play a role in someone else's game, you lose the right to define yourself. All illusions of freedom collapse if the rules are written by a hand other than your own. Third, prioritize the game of achievement, creativity, and usefulness. These games are not based on tearing others down, but on creating real value for the world. They help people compete while moving forward together, turning the craving for status into a motivator instead of a poison. Fourth, respect your fellow players. Everyone is striving to carve out their small place in this world. Respect is the only way the game doesn't turn into war. Fifth, keep yourself warm, sincere, and competent. These 3 qualities are the foundation of sustainable status. A person loved for their sincerity needs no proof. A competent person needs not say much. Sixth, refuse to perform morality. When kindness becomes a stage, morality loses its soul. Doing the right thing doesn't need an audience, and silence is sometimes the bravest act. Seventh, know when to leave the game. No game is worth losing your peace of mind. Winning but being lonely, being glorified but losing self-respect, being loved but no longer being yourself, that is failure at the deepest level. These rules don't promise a perfect world, but they remind us that the game is just a game, and we have the right to choose how to participate. No one forces us to win by trampling over others. No one can forbid us from stopping when we are tired. In the quietness of that awareness, humanity looks back and understands that status is not an enemy. It is the energy of life, the reason we strive, create, and love. But when we forget its limits, that energy turns into a fire that consumes its very holder. Perhaps the purpose of life is not to escape the game, but to play it mindfully. To play to learn, to give, to build, to understand others more, not to prove ourselves superior to them. When humans realize that true value lies not in hierarchy, but in how we treat each other, the status game will no longer be a curse but an art of living. And perhaps, only then will humanity truly be free. Free while still playing. Free because it knows that all wins and losses are just part of the grand play called existence. There is one thing this book constantly reminds us of, whether through the language of science, history, or human solitude. Everything we do is a way to be seen. But it is precisely when we chase that gaze that we gradually lose the ability to see ourselves. The greatest lesson is not about abandoning the game, but about playing it with open eyes. Status is not inherently bad. It is the energy that makes the world go round, that makes artists create, scientists discover, and people help each other. But when status becomes a narcotic, we turn everything beautiful into a tool to prove our superiority. Awakening begins when we stop and ask ourselves, am I seeking truth or just seeking praise? If one day you find yourself tired of having to prove something to the world, try to be silent and ask, if no one were watching, would I still want to do this? The answer will tell you whether you are living for meaning or just for position. Because true happiness is not when we stand above others, but when we stand firm within ourselves. This world does not lack talented people. It only lacks those who dare to live without needing applause. Do you dare to be one of them?